Today we're going to be talking about the various ways that people will find imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things, how this relates to intolerance of uncertainty, and how you can stop doing it to start feeling less anxious. Hi everyone! In today's video, we're going to be talking about various imaginary obstacles or reasons that we often come up with to avoid doing something that we're anxious about or that causes us to worry. These imaginary obstacles can often result in us feeling stuck and frozen in life. And oftentimes, we're not even aware that these imaginary obstacles are simply a manifestation of intolerance of uncertainty. Before I get into that, just a couple of disclaimers to go over. I'm a registered psychologist in the province of British Columbia, Canada, and this video is for informational purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute or replacement for advice from your doctor or mental health professional. Now, with those things out of the way, let's start talking about those imaginary obstacles we sometimes come up with. I want you to imagine a scenario in which I'm a 24-year-old. I'm a 24-year-old living in my parents' home. And although I get along well with my parents and feel comfortable there, there's also a part of me that thinks maybe I should be out on my own, get my own place, and be more independent in my life. However, just the thought of that makes me extremely anxious and worried, and I start to think about all of the what-if questions. Like, what if I'm not able to afford rent? What if I have to get a roommate and I end up with a really terrible roommate? What if I get lonely? What if I can't stay on top of all of my bills? What if I don't do all of the household chores and I end up living in a total mess? Now, these are all very common and reasonable concerns for a young person who's never lived on their own. But rather than acknowledging that it's my anxiety and my worry that's preventing me from moving out, what can sometimes happen, even at a subconscious level, is that I start to generate all sorts of imaginary obstacles or reasons why it doesn't make sense for me to move out. There's nothing affordable in my area. My parents need me to stay at home to help them out and to look after them. My younger siblings are such brats, and so I need to be at home to balance out how much they annoy my parents. It makes more financial sense for me to save money for further education or a down payment on a house. Now, those may all be potential reasons or factors that might prevent me from moving out. But are they the actual reasons? Are all of these things true, or are they just ways of me rationalizing not wanting to do something that makes me really anxious, uncomfortable, and worried? Specifically, moving out on my own and being away from the safety of my home. This is an example of finding imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things, and how this is a form of intolerance of uncertainty. Finding imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things is a very common manifestation of intolerance of uncertainty, in large part because it's a face-saving form of avoidance. I'm not avoiding moving out of my parents' home because I'm afraid. I'm avoiding moving out of my parents' home for all of these really good reasons. But if I'm being honest with myself, the real reason I'm avoiding moving out is because I don't know what it's going to be like on my own. And that uncertainty makes me really scared, anxious, and worried. And so coming up with these imaginary obstacles allows me to avoid moving out and potentially ending up in a really difficult or negative living situation. In doing so, I maintain a sense of certainty because I get to stay at home, and that's something that I know I'm comfortable with, and it's not anxiety provoking for me to be there. It's certainly less scary than living on my own, having to pay all my bills, having to be responsible for my entire space. So you might ask, what's the harm in this? If these imaginary obstacles or reasons not to move out make me feel better and less anxious, what's so bad about that? Well, I think the answer is pretty self-explanatory. By not challenging myself to do things that I've never done before, it limits my growth. It limits my development as a person, and I end up being stagnant and frozen in life. In the example, I end up being unhappy living at home, feeling embarrassed because all of my other friends are independent and on their own, but here I am stuck at home living in my parents' basement because I'm afraid of what it would be like to live on my own. The key thing to recognize is that these imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things are all based on the assumption that if I try something new or something I'm uncertain about, then it's going to turn out badly, and that's going to be awful. But you can probably also recognize that this isn't always the case. Logically, we know that uncertain situations don't always lead to negative outcomes. But as is typically the case with intolerance of uncertainty, it's not a matter of logically knowing that uncertainty doesn't always turn out badly. It's more a problem of not behaving as if that's true. So, how do you know? How do you know if you're actually engaging in this form of intolerance of uncertainty? How do you know if you're coming up with imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things versus these not being imaginary obstacles, and that the reasons that I'm coming up with are perfectly valid and true? Well, a big part of this is being open and honest with yourself, as you're the only one who knows your real motivation. In the scenario where I enjoy living at home, I'm able to help out my parents, I'm saving lots of money, and everyone's happy with the arrangement, then me not wanting to leave home isn't intolerance of uncertainty. It's a positive situation that I feel perfectly happy with. However, in the scenario where I feel embarrassed for still living at home, that I'm not happy there, that my parents aren't happy to have me there, and they keep trying to encourage me to move out, then chances are my obstacles and reasons for staying at home probably aren't valid. And it's probably a good sign that this is me being intolerant of uncertainty. So, okay, you recognize that you're coming up with imaginary obstacles and reasons not to do something that you're anxious about, and you recognize that this is an example of you being intolerant of uncertainty. What can you do about this? How do you fix the situation? Well, the first step is a big one, and that's recognizing that you are coming up with imaginary obstacles and reasons not to do certain things, and that this is a form of avoidance due to my intolerance of uncertainty. Being aware of that and recognizing that is a big first step. Now, the next step is to think about a behavioral experiment that you can do in the situation that involves you tackling some of these imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do something. This doesn't have to be a massive goal, but more a small shift in behavior that challenges some of these imagined obstacles and reasons. One way of thinking about these behavioral experiments is to view them as a test of the accuracy of your worry. So in the scenario I've discussed, what I might do as a behavioral experiment is to start looking online for various places that I might be able to rent in my area. I may have never done that before, and so that's the behavioral experiment. That's what I'm going to do differently in the situation. The next step is to think about what I worry is going to happen in this situation. This is my prediction of what will happen if I start looking at ads for places that I can rent. Remember, it's important to think about your worries as predictions because that's all they really are. So, what might be some of my worry predictions in this situation? Well, I might worry that I won't be able to find a rental unit that I can afford. I worry that all the rental places that I could afford involve me living with a roommate who might end up being creepy or weird. I worry that I might realize that it will never be an option for me to ever live away from home. So we have the experiment, what I'm going to do, and we have my predictions, what my worry predicts is going to happen. The next step is to actually engage in the behavior and see what happens. I start looking at wanted ads to see what I can find. This is the data collection step in the tolerating uncertainty experiment. By collecting the data, you generate evidence which you can now compare to what your worry prediction told you would happen. And that's the last step, comparing what actually happened to what you predicted was going to happen. And what this does is it gives you a sense of how accurate your worries are at predicting what's going to occur in the future. I might find that there's lots of places that I can afford that seem like really great options for me to move into. I might find that people who are looking for a roommate seem really nice, and it may actually be a positive thing for me to live with someone else rather than starting out entirely on my own. In doing these behavioral experiments, if you find over and over again that what you predicted was going to happen doesn't actually happen, then it probably suggests that your worries are pretty terrible predictors of the future. And in doing this, you can begin to start questioning how necessary it is to generate these imagined obstacles or rationalized explanations for not doing certain things. And this can lead you to expanding your world and trying new things because you have experience with your worry not being an accurate predictor of what actually happens. So these behavioral experiments around overcoming these imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things, these behavioral experiments can be powerful in helping you overcome intolerance of uncertainty. The other thing that I often encourage my clients to do as a more general way of building tolerance for uncertainty is to imagine the following question tattooed to the frontal lobe of their brain. If I were more tolerant of uncertainty, what would I do in this situation? By keeping this question at the forefront of your mind, it allows you to start questioning and challenging the motivations behind potential avoidance behavior. Did I decline the invitation by my friend to go to the gym because I don't like gym culture and think that gym culture is toxic? Or did I decline the invitation because I'm worried that I won't know how to use the exercise machines and that I'm going to do something to really embarrass myself? By having this question at the forefront of my mind, it causes me to reflect on and think about what might be motivating my behavior, and thereby potentially challenging these imaginary obstacles or reasons that I come up with for not wanting to do certain things. And by doing this, you build tolerance for uncertainty, and this can lead to you feeling a lot freer, less constricted, and less anxious, because you see that the world is not as scary, frightening, or dangerous as your worry would lead you to believe. So I hope this helps explain how these imaginary obstacles or reasons not to do certain things that we set up in our mind, how these things become forms of intolerance of uncertainty, and how to better recognize when you are coming up with these imaginary obstacles. And when you do recognize that the barriers and obstacles that you're setting up for not doing certain things are actually due to intolerance of uncertainty, it's important to think about what you can do differently to tackle and overcome that underlying avoidance behavior. So I hope that makes sense. I would love to hear any questions or thoughts that you have about this, so please leave me some comments in the comment section down below. If you've been enjoying my videos and would like to see more, please hit that subscribe button and notification bell, and you'll be alerted every week when I post a new video. So that's all for today's video. As always, thank you for making it all the way to the end of this video, and I will see you in the next one.